going to have a look at some strategies for this game, Supply Lines of the American Revolution. Now, it is a strategy game. You're not a quartermaster filling out requisition forms, but the supply is at the heart of the game. So we'll look at an overview of the game real quick just to put the strategies into context. First, of course, is the map. It's kind of a cool map. It's a tall map. It has kind of a period feel to it, but you can see there are a lot of points and areas, not hex-based. If I come in closer to it, there are basically four things about the map. One is the areas, and there are three types of areas. The slightly reddish, pink coral, whatever color that is, that's a city. Cities, of course, are objectives, but for game terms, what they do is they confer a defensive bonus to the occupant, but they also generate supplies every turn. So I have the game set up for the first turn, including the conclusion of the supply portion, so I have some supplies spread around my map. Now off here, this yellow one is a fort. Forts confer a defensive bonus but don't generate supplies. This thing, this little green square, is called a point. It represents agricultural or wilderness areas, and it doesn't confer any kind of benefit in defense, doesn't generate any supplies, but is crucial because a city cannot generate supplies unless they have either an open or an occupied point area there next to their city. So you can isolate a city by occupying the open points around it, prevent it from producing supplies. The fourth part of the map that's crucial is the titular supply line. This line linking the areas together will be the supply line that you want to establish. And the purpose of this is to allow you to concentrate both your forces and your supplies in order to conduct battles and win the game. So our forces are represented abstractly by these markers. The blue are the Patriot side, and red are Crown. The markers in general are referred to as armies in the game, but they're not, specific historical armies, or just groupings of forces. So you can call them formations, groups, whatever, but armies is probably what I'll say. The little tricorn hat, I'm not sure how clearly that comes out. That represents leaders. The leaders are required to conduct attacks, though not defenses. So you move your armies around the map, point to point, and you then can shift your supply when you have continuous connections. So, Boston is kind of isolated here for the British, or the Crown rather, and there's this area in between the two Patriots. So supplies can't move along this line because it's not contiguous. If I occupy that area with Patriot unit, break my forces down into denominations as I see fit, now I have a continuous supply line going all the way from this point down to Providence. So establishing the supply lines is crucial to your campaigning, because you want to figure out where your supplies are, where you want to fight, and then shift both your men and your material to that location. For the Patriots, that can be pretty big. They have, everything from the middle colonies up to the north here is a potential supply source for the Patriots. So we have the Pennsylvania, Maryland down here, moving into New York, and then Massachusetts, Rhode Island, so on. So the mechanics of the game make it such that the Patriots muster forces from their colonial cities. It's a random process. So we may be concentrated up here trying to campaign against Boston, but our first mustering may occur down here in Baltimore. So now I have forces way over here. I need to get up into the area to fight. And I have to move them point to point, and I need supplies to do that. And the Crown has, of course, the Canadian cities up here, Montreal and Quebec. They also have Nova Scotia that acts as a very critical supply and military base. But probably their biggest advantage is in their seaborne transport capabilities. The Patriots are definitely limited to moving along the land, but some of the cities, Falmouth here, Stonington, and even a couple of the points, that little green area has an anchor symbol. That anchor means a port. That means the Crown can transport men and supplies into those ports. Now there's no seaborne invasions. So as long as some Patriots have occupied a port, the British can't attack it. But they can land into open ports. So securing that coast, those ports, is kind of critical for the Patriots. So maps, forces, leaders, and supply. That's what these little cubes are. Green represents food, most likely people processed into Soylent Green, I suppose, and the natural wood represents war materials, war supplies. So each city can generate two green, two food, and one war material per turn. Now the green allows forces to move. One green can move up to 4 units. So if you had 5 units to move, that costs you 2 food cubes. And then the war materials, they purchase battle dice in the combat system. One thing I'll say, I've played a couple of Holmesspiel games now, and what I like about this designer is he gets a point of view, an idea for a game, and then he sticks with that. He kind of focuses on that. So he doesn't put a lot of extraneous things that may detract from that point of view. So this is a strategy game. Ultimately, you have to fight battles, but there's not a complex, combat resolution system. You use your war materials to buy dice, your roll dice for hits, you inflict hits, and you declare a victory, and that's it. It's really fast. And that makes the game overall play very quickly. Maps, units, leaders, supply, combat. How do we win? Well, for the Crown, winning is essentially controlling spaces on the map. Going in close on one of these cities, we have a Crown next to Albany. That is a victory city in game terms. At the outset, the Crown is looking to put down this revolt. They need to capture some cities and hold on to them, and therefore put down the revolt. The cities are spread out a little bit. One of them is up in Canada, Quebec. To the outset of the game, the Crown controls Quebec, and Boston, also a victory city with the Crown. So they have 2. And then there are 4 others on the map. Albany, and then down to New York, Philadelphia, and York. So you see they're kind of spread out. They're not concentrated, so you have to make decisions on how you're going to proceed. But the number of those cities that the Crown must control is going to be determined by essentially the amount of commitment that the home front has put into this effort. At the outset, it's a pretty low commitment. They have 4 units there in Boston, 4 in Quebec, and 2 in Montreal. That'll quickly prove difficult to prosecute the war with such a small force. So if you, as the Crown, call upon the home front to send reinforcements, that can increase the commitment, therefore that increases the expectation. So there is this little track on the map called the Crown Reinforcement Track. And the numbers represent 1 through 4 requests for reinforcements. And as you make a request, you will get the reinforcements, like your 6 units. You'll also start to get supplies at Nova Scotia from the home front. And this, at the bottom, determines how many cities you must occupy. So you can pull the first reinforcements kind of for free. 3 cities. But if you get into trouble, you need the second set of reinforcements, or the third, or the fourth. You can see you start getting up to the point where you need 5 cities. And that's a lot. There's only 6 on the map, so you're saying if you're going to put that much commitment into the war, you have to control the entire colony to put it down. Now this is a game that is looking at the first couple of years of the conflict, only in the northern theater. So the British could potentially win the war by achieving these victory conditions. The Patriots, it's a little different. Historically, they wanted to keep things going, extend the war, and bring in an ally. So what you have for the Patriot victory is this Patriot support track. And the object for the Patriot is to push this marker all the way to the second level to the right to achieve a treaty of alliance with the French. That would be a victory for the Patriots. So how do they move this support marker? Well, it's conducting battles against the Crown forces and winning. So when they achieve a victory, it goes to the right. And it can keep progressing until the first big achievement is the Declaration of Independence. If you can win enough victories, feel confident in issuing that declaration, that gives the Patriots a leg up, and they can never regress any further. And then they can, if they continue to win battles, they can just push that marker all the way to the Treaty of Alliance. Once they get there, that's a victory. Now, the marker can be pushed to the left when they lose battles, when they're attacked by the Crown and lose, especially when the presence of a leader controls whether you advance or regress that marker as well. But basically, you're trying, as the Patriot, to prolong the war, prevent the Crown from achieving their conditions, and hopefully gaining enough victories to achieve that Treaty of Alliance. Another facet of this support is these numbers at the top here. The Patriots can muster reinforcements. These numbers indicate the quantity of men that they can potentially muster. So as your support becomes stronger, you can gradually muster more and more men to your cause. So let's talk Crown strategies to win. At the beginning of the game, they are here in Boston and up in Canada. This is the northern colonies, so they're kind of divided into 3. We have the upper, we'll say, Canada, forts, a very long supply line from Canada. Then we have kind of the middle, which is going to be in the Boston area there. We have the port of Falmouth. We have the cities in the fort there. That's kind of the middle area. Then there's the lower, which is concentrated around New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and these areas. They start out concentrated in the middle there. But one option, potential strategy, is this descent from Canada, from the north. You have forces up there. You could potentially request some reinforcements and put them up here, and then start to move them down these long supply lines. That would get them in the rear of the Patriot armies, gathered around Boston. That's how it would look. Potentially striking at Albany, a victory city. And if all goes well, they can move their way all the way down to New York as well, opening up the whole South. That's a challenging strategy. I've tried it a few times. One thing is that it is a very, very long supply line. Now, supply lines have to be occupied to be, in effect. So the British would have to start thinning their army out, putting units in all of these forts, all the way down. And I'm making change here with forces I don't have. That would be my first challenge. In order to get an army here with a leader, I'd have to have quite a number of troops at my disposal, more than I currently have on the board that's at the start. So I'd have to begin that process and request reinforcements. That bumps up the Patriot support a little, which I don't want to do. It also makes for a very long supply line. Now, these two cities are good production cities. They're going to produce for me basically every turn. But then I have 3 forts that don't produce for me at all. And then that point that doesn't produce for me. So I've kind of used a lot of space without a lot of supplies being produced. I think that's the biggest challenge to this north and west approach. Actually, I haven't even tried the far western approach here, from Montreal down these 2 forts, try to take Albany from the west, for more or less similar reasons. There's just not enough supply being generated by all that territory. So I don't like the north. I haven't had good success with that one. That kind of leads us to the second option here. That's kind of the middle option. Oh, one thing about the north that is even a bigger detriment is that you're not using one of the biggest strengths the British have, which is their seaborne transport. If you're going all inland, your ships are no help to you. But that's where this middle approach kind of shines with the seaborne aspect of it. So if we're here, let's see, back in starting positions, all we have is Quebec and Montreal and Boston. One of the things that you can do is use seaborne transport to get forces out of the northern colonies there, position them to land, likely at Falmouth here. Now the Patriots have to be careful. They can't thin their lines too much because the Crown is still strong there in Boston. So what you could do is land a force here, and this takes a while because the Canadian ports, actually I don't think any port can move directly from one to another. You have to move from the port to this sea box here, which I didn't mention before. But the sea box is sort of a general collecting area. You can actually collect supplies, war supplies, to perform bombardments. I haven't even been tempted to try that yet. But you can move forces into the sea box one turn. Then the next turn you can move them onto an open port. So if I take the middle approach, the middle strategy, I could land them at Falmouth. Now I have a supply generating city, and I also have Cambridge in my crosshairs between Boston and Falmouth. So with the first round of reinforcements, I could then put them here and try to beat back the Patriots from around Boston. If they can move far enough west, they can then go down to Albany. Albany is a good capture. But if you can kind of isolate here to the west and you can force your way down, it's a long way. You've got 2 cities and 3 points to fight your way through. But it is possible with 1 reinforcement, and it's very possible with the second group of reinforcements to make very strong progress this direction. And of course, everything depends on winning battles. If you're not able to generate supplies, establish the supply lines and move the supplies to your front, you won't be able to push one side or the other back. So that's kind of a middle strategy that takes advantage of the seaborne capabilities of the British. Now you can also, if possible, land in the Stonington here in the rear, but as a Patriot player, you have a unit right there. The first thing you want to do is to reinforce Stonington and prevent any landings. There is that fort right there, but those become kind of a prisoner of war camp, because if you land forces there, the only way to supply them is by sea, and they don't form any kind of supply line with anything else, so it's very, very exposed. At least Boston here, you have a chance at generating supplies if you control that point. But the fort, you're isolated and you're restricted to only what you can transport by sea. So I haven't tried that as a potential landing spot. Now there's another approach. I guess I would call it the lower approach strategy. It's kind of similar to the upper there, in that you can potentially land forces far in the south at this little point right there. So now you have dispersed your army greatly, and that point doesn't generate any supplies, but it's also a long way from the Patriot army. And the Patriots can get the jump on you if they are lucky enough to muster forces Baltimore or Philadelphia. They can box you in. That's not so terrible, because just use seaborne transport and get out of there. But it's a decent entry point to the southern colonies here. Well, I should say lower colonies here in the north. Because once you establish that, you now have the Patriots, caught between 2 ends. Now, you yourself are very dispersed. You don't have a lot of support from your other northern army there. But with your seaborne transport, you can keep getting supplies to the forces, and that's the key. If you can't supply your forces, you can't move them and you can't fight with them. So as long as you have your seaborne transport, you have a strong chance of making either the middle or the lower strategy work. And the challenge is that there's a whole lot of mustering and supply cities right here. So even if the Patriots aren't especially lucky and they manage to muster in Morristown, they can still get to Philadelphia and cut you off before you're able to supply yourself. And that's one of the keys. You can only move supplies by sea once per turn. You can move units multiple times during the turn, but without supplies, units are not very useful. So those are a few crown strategies. The north here, I've had no good luck with that, trying to come down from Canada through the forts. Too little supply, too long to travel. The middle strategy has worked, I think, fairly well, fairly reliable. It requires some bad luck for the Patriots, but getting Cambridge there in the sights of both Boston and Falmouth can really allow you to converge and strike hard and then move both north or west and south at the same time. The southern approach I've had almost succeed, not quite. It seems tempting because you have all this open area, but often you can get kind of bottled up in here. You can get 2 victory cities, but not up here to New York. That's a long route to get up here. 1, 2, 3, 4 points to secure New York, to say nothing of getting up to Albany. So if you abandon Boston in an effort to concentrate down here, it may not help you that much. So currently I'm liking the middle strategy, but I'm going to try to defeat that with the Patriots. So what is a good Patriot strategy? Well, it's the rope-a-dope. You want to try to win some victories without taking pretty severe losses. Capturing territory isn't that important because effectively you already have most of the map. You can muster, it's random when you muster, but you can have forces pop up where you don't expect them or even want them, but at least those cities will start producing supplies for you. One advantage the Patriots have is they don't always have to fight a pitched battle. If a Crown unit is in one of these green points, the Patriots have the option to fight a skirmish. So it costs them, the same supplies it would if they were to fight a pitched battle, but they can roll one battle die, or they can purchase battle dice with their war materials and roll their battle dice to attack the Crown, but they can't really achieve a victory. What they can do is sort of whittle down the Crown's strength without really risking themselves, because the Crown has no opportunity to shoot back. So they can skirmish, maybe inflict a loss, and then go back to where they came from. Cost them supply, but didn't cost them either forces or support. There's no chance of losing that battle. Now for a game that requires strategy and planning, sort of thinking your moves ahead, the Patriots actually have to end up being quite reactive, and for 2 reasons. They muster, randomly at different points on the map, and then every winter their forces disband. They're not lost, they're not surrendering, they're just going home. So depending on how your forces are disposed at a particular point, you may lose half of your army at the winter turn. And then you remuster, and they show up wherever they show up. So whatever plan you might have had, that could just be gone when the new year comes. So you do have to be a little more reactive with the Patriots than with the Crown. But that said, you want to, as the Patriots, undertake as many battles as you can. You think you can win. And winning is, it's very loosely defined. Essentially, you win when you have more forces left at the end of the battle. So these 2 might be fighting. We'll give them each a war material. That means they would each have a battle die. Throw their die, inflict any casualties at the end of the battle. Just one throw of the dice. Whoever has the most forces is declared the victor. And then you determine whether or not the defender stands and maintains his position in the area wherever they're fighting, and the attacker has to retreat, or the reverse. The defender has to retreat and the attacker can take the space. But the victory is determined merely by the size of the forces remaining. So you can win victories and yet still retreat back to where you came from. So that's my best take on the Patriots. Sniping with skirmishes when you can to sort of start to chip away at the Crown's strength. Eventually that'll force them to request reinforcements, which will push your support up. If you can win some battles, that'll push your support up. Once you get to the Declaration of Independence, it actually becomes sort of a race to the finish. All you have to do is win a couple of battles to get yourself to that Treaty of Alliance. So getting across this line right here to the second level is really critical. I've often had that support going up and down in this area for, 2 of the year turns. and not quite getting to that Declaration of Independence. That tells me no chance. That's about the time to call the game, because there's no point to just go to the end for nothing. I mean, a draw is a draw, but if we can't ever get the French involved, the colonies are not going to get their independence. So there are some approaches to supply lines of the American Revolution. It's a cool, fun little game. It plays pretty quickly, so you can try these things. It's not going to be some massive 3-month affair to figure out if your northern strategy is going to work. You can play it, come to a conclusion inside of 2 hours, and try something else. So if you like these kind of strategy games, I'd give this one a go. It's definitely worth the time.